Hello, hello. Welcome to the 22nd episode of BINJ Live. I'm your co-host, Jason Pramas, down here today. And up there is our other co-host, who is...
Chris Faraone. How's it going?
Yeah. Hey, and we're both with the Boston Institute for Nonprofit Journalism. We have titles, you can read them. And tonight, our very special guest is Shira Laucharoen. Yay!
So glad to be here. Thanks so much for having me.
Hello.
We were having technical difficulties before we got the show started, so we're all a little bit like, oh. But so Shira is I styled her as a composer, musician, and kind of reporter for several local outlets, including at various times BINJ itself. But what else would you like to say about yourself, Shira? We usually kind of get started with our guests talking about themselves and where they come from and their whole deal.
Yes. So happy to be here. Thanks for having me. I'm Shira. I'm originally from New York City, have been living in Boston, in Somerville, actually, for years. And while here, as Jason mentioned, I've gotten to sort of dig into the journalism scene, but also I spent a lot of time as a musician. I'm a composer and I sometimes perform my own work as a singer. And just over the past few years, I've gotten to really explore the city, collaborate with and meet other artists, which has been really just a wonder and a joy, I think. And see things, really start to open up and take off a little bit more, which has been pretty thrilling.
Well, Shira, I have to ask you that as a fellow New Yorker, but who's now basically a greater Bostonian after God knows how many years. I think I've lived here more than I ever lived in New York City, where I grew up in Queens. But I have to ask you the annoying question that everyone always asks me. And I'm going to have I don't know how into sports you are, but when people ask me, what's it like to live in Boston when you're a New Yorker? For me, I feel like they're always asking, like, how do you not live where the Knicks are?
Right.
But for, otherwise, I love it here. I don't know, but when you're asked that, what's your answer? How do you, as a New Yorker, how do you feel about Boston?
I always deflect by saying I'm not really a sports fan. I never got too into sports. I was always into performing arts more. But, growing up, I would have to say that I watched the Yankees.
Well, how about even theater-wise? Just the theater scene here do it for you? The smaller shows, the bigger ones.
Love the theater scene here too. I think it's really tremendous. I've gotten to really see and also interview and talk to some of the directors and actors and playwrights who live around here. And I think it has really beautiful things going on that maybe not as many people in the country are aware of. Maybe they don't think of Boston as the theater capital of the world. But I think the artists here are just tremendously gifted. And I've loved getting to see, from musicals to comedies, tragedies, everything really has been a gift, I think.
And are you what we would call classically trained? I don't know, is that a technical term? And why don't you tell us about? And listen, I gotta say, I'm gonna say this out, and I've said it to you before. I'll pander a little here. I am blown away by your talent. I've known that you have the background and that you're a composer when you were working with us as a reporter. But when you have never heard someone sing and hear someone sing like you, and that you make your own songs, so just give us the low on I know that even if you, I can't imagine many people, even if they're born with talent, being able to do what you do. So how did you get to the point where some of the music that I'm going to put in the clips that we put out with this interview? I think people will want to know, oh wow, this isn't this isn't just living or shower singing. So how did you get to the point where you're doing this?
It's really been a journey, honestly. I started playing piano pretty young, and my training in piano was classical. And though I would say since then I've sort of veered away from that a little bit. That's how I grew up pretty much. And when I was maybe in elementary school, around 10 or 9 years old, I started really wanting to write music. And what I was drawn to was sort of the musical theater sound, songs that tell a story, I think. And back then, I think I was hesitant to really sing myself and sort of put my voice out there. So I would write the music mostly for piano, and they would be these instrumentals. And so that's where things began. And then, growing out of that, I was sort of pushing more and more towards wanting to be a performer of a different style, and that was or a different art form, really. And that was, getting into acting and taking some voice lessons a little bit growing up, but also not always feeling like I knew where my place was in that world, maybe. And so that came to I came to a time, in college where I found myself wanting to sort of write music that really did have actors singing. And so got involved in some campus productions, wrote for them, and had, performers singing my work, but I wasn't actually singing things that I wrote myself.
That's a lot different than journalism. What's it like to have
very
just
different.
somebody
Yeah, I
singing
was
your
gonna
words, the things that you wrote, and what's that like?
I think it's really it's rewarding, it's exciting, it's thrilling. And that's because I think you start with these things sort of in your head. It comes from somewhere more private. When you're composing, it's you and a piano, and you're just sort of putting your ideas together on paper there. And then when you give that to somebody else and it's in their hands, it's a collaboration where sometimes they bring something to the song that you yourself wouldn't have seen before. And so seeing their own interpretation of it, I think, just sort of builds upon what you did before even more, and enhances it. And it allows you to sort of open your mind and see other things.
I don't know if we should get into journalism at this point. We could play a little clip within this stream of Shira singing that she gave us, or we could not do that. What would you all prefer?
I'm happy to talk about journalism.
Well, I want to.
Right,
I don't know. I think I mean well, okay. Can we segue then with, I don't know if anybody has any opinion on the new Sondheim biography, or I just want to know about your influences in general. And because this is not, I'm from New York. I've been to a million shows, but it's not my scene. Like, I don't know the insides, and I hear your music, and certainly there are inspirations there. Not as easy for me to pinpoint. Maybe Jason has a little bit more knowledge of that world, but and yes, this is the hot new book out that I'll be buying for my mother.
Never heard of it. No idea.
I haven't read it yet. I haven't read it either, but I do admire Sondheim. I love his work. Grew up always enjoying Into the Woods and Sweeney Todd, all the classics. And there's more recent work that I enjoy too. I got to see the American Repertory Theater is a great organization here in Boston who did a production of Gatsby. That was a lot of fun, not to be confused with the Gatsby that's now on Broadway. This
Okay.
had music by Florence Welch of Florence of the Machine.
Okay.
Beautiful show. Love Hadestown on Broadway. Story of Orpheus and Eurydice told through folk music. Those are some of my sort of more recent favorites, I think. But yeah, would love to hear about the Sondheim book.
Well, I don't know yet. I'll report. So was your first journal, like writing journal, like movement into journalism, writing about things like the theater world or music or stuff, or did you kind of like get the hell away from that and do news, which some people do? What was your entry point?
I mean, it depends on where you look at beginning. So when I came to Boston, I was doing everything, I think. And I sort of over time funneled into writing more about theater and arts and culture, which is, as I continue to freelance a little bit now, I mostly cover performing arts. But yeah, I mean, when I first came to Boston, I got connected with this newspaper based in Chinatown called Sampan,
Yep.
which is, they are run by a nonprofit called the Asian American Civic Association. I'm a writer of Asian heritage, and I thought it would be great to get involved with that. Back then, this is sort of where everything began for me, in Boston, at least. The coverage was, it was primarily focused around things like town meetings, local events, festivals. And I think over time it grew a little bit more, to sort of be, more, maybe a little more expansive in certain ways, Pan-Asian, centering around trends and social issues and, news going on nationally. And I don't, necessarily think one or the other is better or worse, but it was an interesting growth and change to see. And so I got to cover a lot of interesting and unique stories there. I got to write about deportations. I got to write about, a lot of arts events as well. The Boston Asian American Film Festival, Boston Chinatown musical that was being worked on. And basically that was my entry point into the journalism world here. And while it started there, it definitely didn't end there either.
And you hadn't done journalism in college, or you had?
I had done it in college. I had done sort of a variety of different types of writing. I dabbled in, a few news stories here and there, but mostly was more interested in arts and culture writing.
Right.
So I'm going to ask you a question that I think, it's just, however, this is the kind of question people really want to know. You mentioned that, you've had different assignments. You've had longer term, shorter term, full-time, part-time. Now you're doing a lot of freelance work you have over the years. Real simple, point blank. What is it like to be, say like an arts freelancer in Boston right now? There's fewer outlets.
Is it your main gig? I think I already know the answer to that question.
Even just the process, you have a thing coming up. And I think people out there don't realize, there's experts like, you keep your finger on the pulse of certain scenes, theater. So how does that work?
It's really juggling a lot, I think, and learning how to multitask. I think if you're someone in my situation, you have to be comfortable sort of with the unknown. And I think that means creating structure for yourself in some ways. So, I had sort of stepped back a little bit from the journalism to do freelancing today. Where I am today, while at the same time doing music and working a full-time job. And so I think that, you have to be okay with, sort of being flexible, pivoting quickly, researching stories on your own. And as Chris said, keeping your finger on the pulse. And so I think basically what that looks like is, trying new things sometimes, pitching stories while also taking assignments that editors send over to you. I think really just going sort of wherever the flow of things takes you.
Are you a person with a strong weekly schedule, and you kind of, apportion your time to journalism in this block, music in this block, and then your regular job and regular hours, or what?
Yeah, my current job is, in terms of the structure of it, is a little bit flexible because it's hybrid. My current job that I do full time is working for a nonprofit that supports adults with disabilities. It's called You're With Us. And so some of that looks like me just doing a lot of administrative work behind the scenes and hiring people and matching them up with participants who come to us with disabilities who are seeking connections with mentors. But another part of that is the in-person work. I run a number of groups that I put together. I meet with a mentee one-on-one. And so that's something that I do for, most of my hours during the week. And then in my spare time, I will make the interviews happen. I'll pull, I really, with the music events, I'm big on organizing things. I will, I'll be reaching out to places, basically I would advise a musician who's trying to do this to find the organizations, make sure you've got some video clips, some, good material that you can send over to them, and then just keep trying at it. I think that's what
I see the kind of, tell me, I want to talk about the event that you recently did, and which was really fantastic and so DIY, but also so well put together. But I see the kind of music you do. What do we call it? What kind of how do you describe the music you do? The theater show tune / I don't know.
I've heard someone has called me pop adjacent before, which
I
I will
like that.
Pop
take.
adjacent.
Show,
Okay.
dude.
I take.
So I think I compare it though, that kind of music though, I see a lot that because of the theater dynamic of it, it's kind of like when you see the people in the Winter Olympics and they do those huge ski jumps where it's like that's like the biggest, it's like what comes before that, right? When it comes to like theater, I know there's like obviously off Broadway, but this is interesting because it's not club music traditionally. I mean, there are piano bars, there are places for it, but I think so. I want to, you did your own a really fantastic show recently in Cambridge. So just tell us about the venue and how you set
Yeah,
that up, and also your place in all of it because you kind of produced the show. You're
yeah,
also the main performer, but put an entourage around you. And I just thought it
yeah,
really came out well. Packed the house, so props to
Yep.
that. And we'll have video to prove it. We'll put some of that in. But yeah, just tell us about that process and.
yeah. I think something that I've learned about is just like you have to be willing to wear many hats, I think. And so what went into this is I think sometime over the summer of last year, I reached out to the Foundry in Cambridge,
Yep.
which is sort of an innovative arts hub in the Kendall Square area. And basically, I sent them some clips. They offered to let me use the space for a reasonable rate. And basically, they gave us this beautiful black box theater to perform in.
Yep.
I quickly learned that I was going to be responsible for a lot of the work that goes into getting that set up. So it's not just being a performer, but it also meant things like hiring a technical director, being there the night before to set up the space.
Food. It was
Yes,
fantastic
food.
food.
Yeah.
That's one of the best noodles I've ever had, I swear. So props
Yeah,
to-
yeah.
Who was that? Give a shout out. Who was the
That
prop?
was Boone Market in Arlington.
Yeah, they are awesome.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So we wanted to bring a food vendor in that we were able to do with no charge, and it was great to connect with them. Nice small local business.
Yeah.
They were serving Thai food and some desserts and drinks. Basically, we got this space set up, and I was working with a cellist who I collaborate with regularly. She accompanies me on some of my performances, and then we also needed to put together a second act.
Right.
So I was sort of brainstorming what kind of figure, what kind of musician would be an interesting person to sort of complement what was going on here. And so I remembered having seen I also write for WBUR.
Right.
And so I had been at a party of theirs honoring what they call their makers, which is an honor that they give to emerging artists of color. And so I remembered seeing this fabulous act there by a musician named Pranav Swaroop. And so he plays classical Indian violin, but it's paired with beatboxing and sometimes other instruments. I think he had to keep someone on keyboard here, but in the past, maybe it's been guitar as well. So the effect is, he's described it as it's traditional yet futuristic. It's out of this world.
It was that. That's for sure. Yeah.
Well, I gotta say, it was just a great example of the whole, just the overall the show of, you gotta make your own space sometimes, and I do think that I am a fan of your music. I'm not a fan of a lot of music that doesn't bang your eardrums in. I think there's a place for it, what you're doing in various venues across city, and I think I do want to ask you. This is the kind of a dumb question. Is what's easier? These are very hard. Being a journalist in Greater Boston, or being, trying to become a journalist, get in the journalism scene, get a foothold there, or doing it in the music scene. I know they're different things because there's various music scenes. There are various journalism scenes, but just overall, generally speaking, what would you tell the young? Because Jason and I, we've been through the ringer a million times. We don't even know anymore. What's your impression?
Yeah, what's going on?
I think it's using kind of different. Something just happened.
Oh,
yeah, it's okay. You're still here. You're still here.
I'll keep talking.
Just go for it.
It's using different skill sets. Probably, I think I see journalism as I almost see myself a little more behind the scenes in that sense. You're interviewing people, you're doing phone calls, you're doing a lot of writing, sort of alone in the writing can feel solitary sometimes. The music is it's so live. It's you're out there in front of an audience and you're putting a lot of personal emotion on the line, I think. But it's something that I love, and it's something that I get a rush out of doing, I think, too.
Cool.
So to me, it's absolutely like, I think if I wasn't doing this, I would feel like I was holding back a part of myself, maybe. And so I think that's part of why I continue to do this. I think you sort of just put everything out there. But the journalism is something that I think sustains me and engages me in a different way. And they're both equally important.
Awesome. Well,
and what does the future look like for Shira Laucharoen? Where do you want to go with all the stuff you're doing right now, or some of it? Like, you want to focus on music? I mean, I don't necessarily see you just focusing on journalism, but what are you thinking?
Yeah, I think it's all of that. I want to keep carving out sort of a path for myself in music. I'd love to do more performances. I'd love to maybe record sometime or collab. I think collaborating with others has been one of the most fulfilling parts. I've got a project coming up this summer, which is basically where I wrote a 10-minute ballet of sorts. It's an instrumental, but I'm collaborating with a choreographer. Her name is Janelle Gilchrist. She's the founder of an organization called Janelle Gilchrist Dance Troupe. And so we're working together. She's putting together a concert also at the Foundry, incidentally, for July. And basically, we haven't gotten to a rehearsal stage yet, but she's going to be putting this on its feet, and it's going to be staged, which is something that's just incredibly exciting to me. And then a good friend of mine, Julian Gao, who is a conductor who founded an orchestra called Horizon Ensemble. He is stepping into music direct. So we'll be putting together a small trio. There's going to be a flute player, a cellist, and a pianist who will likely be Julian. And he'll be sort of, pulling the music together and working with them so that I'm in a new position where I get to step back a little bit more, I think. So I won't be performing in this show, but I will be able to sort of oversee it and have written it and maybe direct it a little bit. So that's something I'm really excited about. And I think what I was saying is that just the collaborations are a really wonderful part of this work, just seeing sort of where that takes you.
Anything else you got coming up? It is awesome. Anything else you got coming up, or anything else we didn't discuss that you'd like to discuss?
Because both concerts not enough.
I don't know, man. We know Shira.
More.
Like, I know more about Shira that, I'm not asking specific questions because Shira's not bringing up specific issues, but I don't know. So just want to make sure everything's cool.
I thought this is I think this will be a fun one for people to know about, but also in July, I'm playing at the Crystal Ballroom.
There you go.
And so,
wow.
Yeah. That's
what kind, is that like a show opening for someone, or how's that going?
It's a little bit of both. They took me on and they asked me just to find a second act. So,
where do they, I mean, this is huge news. Where do they learn about you?
I reached out to them.
From Shira.
I some clips.
Wow. All right.
I hear about this stuff.
Here
What
we
she's
go.
doing.
Put on your seatbelt. I mean, I think, and I think also I have there are a couple hip hop producers. I always tell. I just think I don't know what it is because I'm not a music. I only wrote about music for years. That's what those of us often who can't do music, those who are tone deaf, do. But I just think that I can see loops. I can see, again, collaborations, and that's one of the things I think Boston does have. Obviously this just robust music scene, but it is also very interconnected, often through the studios. So yeah, I can't wait to see what happens with that, and obviously I'll be there. And that's I think much like the room that. At the Foundry, the sound is fantastic in there. It should be pretty dope for you.
Yeah. I'm so excited about it. We're going to be playing on July 18th, which is the day of Artbeat, big festival in Somerville.
Yeah, that's sick.
Yeah, very exciting. And I was searching for someone to work with who would be our second act, and I felt that the Crystal Ballroom would maybe be interested in someone with a bit more of a pop background. Not necessarily in the musical theater vein that I'm sort of closer to. But I ended up finding someone named Felicity Page, who is she's sort of a folk indie rock artist.
Cool.
So I think it's going to be fun. I think it's going to be different. It's going to be unique, and I can't wait to see what it's like.
Well, and now we have this video on the record. We did it first, and I no, really, this is, you know,
No,
you
it's
gotta,
true. It's true.
you know, get the rookie card now. That's what we say right now. So thanks. This is fantastic here. So
Yeah.
obviously we
Yeah.
gotta, you know, we gotta get posts up, and you know, even go back to parts of this and bring them back out. So just, you know, stay in touch. I know you and Jason talk a lot, and give us those dates and any information. But really, I was over on top of the talent, just even the event that you did. Really, that was fantastic for a hip hop dork like me to really come and have a good time. I think it's always nice to get a little culture out. So, and a fantastic venue too, by the way.
Yeah.
Cindy did a great job on that. So
Yeah.
So, you know, thanks for coming on. Obviously, you have an option now. You can hang around while Chris and I wrap up, or not. You could just leave. So it's up to you.
Are we still on air, or?
Oh, very much so. Yeah. It's like, I mean, to the degree like it's live. Like there's all these people watching.
Yeah,
We're not at that stage. But all right, cool. I mean, so we were. I don't know. We've been starting to just now. Really, we started a little bit last week, but it was just Chris and I segmenting this show. We thought, okay, we'll have the guests do not the full 15 minutes we usually go, but like however long that person wants to speak, 20, 30, 40 minutes, and then we can talk a little more about some other stuff. And we were talking about restarting a column that Chris really did when we owned Dig, but
well,
the column,
it's an old column. It goes back decades, you know. That
I was going to say, it goes back to the beginning of Dig Boston, right? So back to 1999 or so, right? But it's a media criticism column. Chris continued it, you know, when we had Dig Boston between 2017 and 2023. We're talking about bringing it back, both writing for it, you know. And Chris, do you have some media you'd like to criticize this week?
Well, I mean, so first of all, as far as Media Farm goes, I think, you know, the history of media criticism in Boston is rich. I've been a part of it almost my whole career. And like, you know, the thing about being a media critic or a media squared person, you know, media on media in this market has always been that it's career suicide. The Boston Phoenix had a media writer, one of their staff writers. In the past, that was John Keller, I think. Dan Kennedy held that position. Adam Riley. People may be familiar with some of those names.
Yep.
Mark Jerkowitz, they actually, from what I recall, often they got paid more, I think, a little bit more, because like you were kind of screwing your chances of going somewhere else, right? Because you'd have to report on the Globe, so they might not like you. And at the Dig, though, we took it an extra step, is where, you know, it was kind of just cowardly, anonymous slander, and it was I'm obviously kidding. It was dirty though, often, and it was gossipy. It was the Gawker era, even pre-Gawker, I'd say, the early Dig stuff. And for me, you know, Media Farm evolved over the years. I take it more as a, you know, I seem to always have these Upton Sinclair books. This is the brass check from 1909, but it's just simple media criticism. This is how ridiculous these people are. They make themselves look stupid, and here it is. We don't even have to curse that much. Sometimes I do, but nevertheless, with this past week, the prohibitionist anti-cannabis stuff is like completely out of control. And of course, in Massachusetts, there is a ballot initiative. It looks like it's going to be on the ballot to repeal adult use cannabis. And I could talk about this in a million ways. Today, I actually was in Framingham covering a gathering of the opposition, so the pro-cannabis people. But meanwhile, the media is apparently already in the camp of repealing adult use cannabis. In the past week, we have seen national stories, local stories, and the thing is, Upton Sinclair he has a great quote about it, and I read it on another. I don't want to get a reputation here. I read it on another podcast. Where the hell did I just throw that book? It disappeared on me. Anyway, I do this thing when I'm talking. I like throw things, like, you know, the way they, you know, all the great.
We're both Mediterranean, you know, so hands go around.
I know. It just disappeared on me. Anyway, but
what's going to happen? What
Sinclair's basically saying is that, you know, we can't always look at the way media is behaving and say, oh, they really hate weed, or they really like weed. No, they really like clicks. And cannabis, anything negative is clicks. So that means if a dispensary is broken into, right? If something bad is happening, and a repeal would be very bad. There'd be thousands of people out of work. It would be basically a disaster for this industry, and they're eating it up. And of course, any alarmist stuff we're seeing, people are getting sick from cannabis. Never mind that it pales in comparison to the countless environmental disasters, everything that the three of us have covered endlessly for BINJ and other outlets, how that make people sick, that get no coverage at all. Never mind, it is sensational garbage. And basically, that's my rant. Media Farm, to resurrect it will really be, I'm going to be bringing different pieces of media here, like I did last week with that New York Times piece of garbage about Bobby Garnett, aka Bobby from Boston. And I think it's just easy to show how, we may be small, we may be independent, but in just so many ways, we have significant integrity where these larger outlets lack. And I think the more I watch these TV goofballs with their suits on, some of them are dressed like they're going to a wedding at 8 o'clock in the morning. I don't know why that is necessary. And really, and it's so superficial. They look like that, and then they're really delivering news that's not very serious at all. And it's sad, the resources that are put into that. I don't know. So we hope to. I don't know if it's about moving the needle, but sometimes when you put the pressure on reporters, they can respond and listen, even though they may be reluctant to concede that movement in public. So that's. I don't know. What have you had your eye on, Mr. Pramas?
Oh, well, I mean, I was going to just talk about my last editorial because it's relevant since it's a fundraising thing.
Oh, and Shira, did you start as an intern before you were our staff writer?
No, I was part of the Pandemic Democracy Project.
Okay. Yeah. So that was Dig Boston. Well, it was under BINJ. We ran everything it produced because Dig had no money, but BINJ had some money. So we started the Pandemic Democracy Project in 2020.
That was
around April.
That was an intern project, kind of, right?
Kind of.
Interns were involved, but I mean, I think, I don't know, Shira just sort of appeared. I don't know, like a fairy godmother or something, started writing. I don't remember Shira ever being an intern for us. And Shira was well out of school, years out of school when she started writing for us.
I was an editorial assistant for a while there.
Right.
Well, I mean, we then
doing light editing, I think, in the beginning.
We brought you in through BINJ in 2021 as the halftime staffer for the Somerville Wire that we had started and ran for 3 years. So you were the first reporter for that, and that was the only like real, quote unquote real job we were ever able to give you. Whatever it was, $500 a week, like very little money. And, you had a title and stuff and you did it for about a year and then had to move on, obviously. And what I wrote about in my editorial last week sort of relates to this because I didn't want to finish off the Shira segment or the Shira show with like super depressing discussions of the quote unquote future or lack thereof of journalism. And some of what we see on TV is even part of that. Because like TV news, as with the rest of news, is going down. Jobs are going away. There's less and less eyeballs on screens. Certainly, people younger than 40 or even 50 sometimes don't even watch TV anymore. Qua TV, right? They watch stuff on their screens, like whatever it is, whatever social media channel, whatever they're looking at. That's what they're looking at. But they're not going to WCVB News. They're not going to like WHDH News, right? NBC 10, whatever it is. There's less and less of that. So it's probably less and less of a surprise that the people that are supposed to be what passes for journalists on TV news in this era are much, much more like what the British call newsreaders. They're just people reading a script that's given to them, and they may write it. It depends, right? But they cannot go more than surface deep on anything, right? For the rest of us, doing what used to be called print journalism, except now we're primarily doing it digitally. So doing text, right? Writing things and then, releasing those things in different forms, including video like we're doing here, which we didn't, our operation really didn't used to do much. If anybody did it, it was Chris. And we did some stuff in video, and we did some audio too, some podcast stuff. But, mainly we've stuck to text. And all the operations like us that we know of, certainly in our size, but also large news organizations like, the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette I've brought up before, they finally got a union contract after years of fighting for one. And then the rich owner of the publication just shut it down. It's about to close by May, I think, and there are plenty of other large, very famous publications.
Languishing.
Yeah, that's a good word. So, but the Washington Post, LA Times, all these big publications are laying off dozens or hundreds of reporters. The only ones that are supposedly growing are maybe some of the largest publications like the New York Times that claims it just went up to 2,500 people in some kind of reportorial role across their many, many media properties. It's not just a newspaper anymore at all, right? And in that environment, here we are, Boston Institute for Nonprofit Journalism, this little 3.25 staff organization. And I had already written in the previous editorial, about a month ago, we have money till late June as an organization, and we're $75,000 to $90,000 short to finish out the year. So, we need a big grant or some smaller grants, which we're working on, obviously on both things, or just some person with money to step in. And so, we put that out there. We have nothing to hide on that front or any front, I hope. And then last week, I'm like, hey, why don't I write about our dire need for funding for our internship program? Because, we have 30 interns right now. It's completely crazy, to have, for such a small group, to have such a large intern cohort. It's been growing and growing over the last couple of years in particular. So I wrote about that, and with the kind of threat to our organization in the background, I'm like, even before that, for our summer cohort of interns, we're having to tell people that are applying now, we can't even pay you the 150th story we've been paying. We're just not going to have that money, right? So if you want to, and you have to understand that if you're an intern with us, you start in May or early June, that by July, we may not be paying ourselves. We may not know exactly. And we've been through periods like this with BINJ before, but, we don't know that we can just keep having periods where we run without salary. We're already up there, all of us. We have many years under our belt in this industry and just in life in general. I'm almost 60. How many times can I keep running with no salary? It's not like we make a bunch of money. Our full-time equivalent, as I've said before, is $50,000 a year, right? And that's not enough really to live on, individually in the Boston area, right? So I won't get into our personal lives in great detail or whatever, but it's very, very difficult even to do what we've been doing. And we really would like, though, whatever our travails as an organization, have at least to be able to have at least the, and by the way, we did just blink out there for a second. We've been having a little trouble with the service we've been using, Restream lately, these little pop-outs. Anyway, we thought it was important to specifically ask for angels to come in and donate to our interns so we could offer an actual stipend, going forward, but at least for the summer cohort, right? So that people are getting, a couple $1,000 for the 2 or 3 months they're with us, something like that, something decent, right? And with us, we understand our interns always have other priorities in life, and we're not trying to get in the way. We understand we're the last thing they can think of, and that's perfectly fine. They can, if they have other internships, that's great. Obviously, they have school and work to deal with, even in the summer, right? Many of them have to try to work their way through school, which is functionally impossible at this point when schools are so very expensive, right? So that's what the editorial was about. Funding the internship program, although I was quite clear, we'll hold some aside for operating expenses, but we're not going to float our operation on whatever money we might pull in for the intern program. So just folks should understand that. But if anybody happens to see this video, as with the editorial last week, you see it, we're saying, somebody with some money, it could be a person, an organization, a company, whatever, a nonprofit, doesn't matter, or you are that person, you have a couple bucks, you're running an organization or institution that could help us, give us drop us a line at info@binj.news, basically. And as with what Shira was telling us, upcoming shows, whatever Shira wants to give us, and this information we'll put in the description box on this YouTube video. And as far as the final video, we're gonna have to figure out how we get in some Shira video or whatever.
We'll get the Shira video in. I'm looking at what I'm looking at right now. I'm already.
Thank you.
And Shira, we'll have to get your info. Yeah, exactly. We'll tell everyone, and we'll put some stuff.
I think Chris shot some of the videos too, I think.
Yeah.
That's right. Yeah. I'm just saying this particular video that we're in right now it's automatically on YouTube as is.
Yeah.
So, we may have to upload a different version or whatever, and certainly some shorter slices, although right before this show, we did not figure out quite how to get just Shira talking with Chris and I in the background and any of us so that we can have nice short videos we cut out of this, but we'll figure it out.
We'll get there.
All right. So any parting words, Shira?
No, I hope, as Jason was saying, I hope people will continue to donate and support, BINJ's programs, especially for the younger interns. Yeah, I wasn't an intern, but I was at, writing and, a younger journalist myself at one point.
Right. And you will, of course, remain younger than us. So, because we all age together. So, all right. Thanks a lot, Shira Laucharoen. It's been great having you on the show. We'll obviously have you back. And we'll be back next Tuesday, probably at 8 p.m.-ish, here on YouTube Live with some guests. We're not quite sure who the guests will be, but we like to have fun like that. So peace, everybody. And now we're going to do our thing where I click end stream and we try to freeze, like we're the end of a Family Guy episode, like doing this or whatever while we end the stream. Bye, folks.
Thanks so much. Bye.